So I'm going to start actually our event. First of all, I would like to say good evening, and I would like to welcome you all to this exciting event entitled Let's Learn, Let's Dream the Path to a Better Future. We have got amazing panelists, including Austen Ivereigh. My name is Bekele Oyecha. I'm the Director of UK Welcomes Refugees that has organized today's event. Our organization is new, actually. It was only founded in July, so we are in a journey. But we really want to work to see a more welcoming world for all. We are keen to see a community sponsorship movement. We are there to grow a powerful movement of sponsorship. And we really want to work with resettled families, sponsors, and the wider sponsorship movement so as to transform and work on campaigns that are really important for us and for the movement. We have got an amazing panelists. It's going to be chaired by Sarah Teather. Sarah Teather is director of the Jesuit Refugees. She served in the past as an MP for Brent East and Brent Central. She also served as a Minister of State for Children and Families between 2010 and 2012. She was also the chairperson of All Party Parliamentary Group on Refugees. I now pass the baton on to Sarah. Sarah, please.
Thank you so much, and a huge welcome to you all on this very cold night. As one of the benefits of doing these things on Zoom is we can actually get together even when it's snowing. I hope you're not all too cold. I have to say, underneath this table, I've got a little blanket wrapped around my leg to try and keep myself warm. So thank you so much for joining us. I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion tonight. I'm really delighted to be part of it and to be chairing. It's always good to have an opportunity to talk to Austen Ivereigh, who's a friend, and I love to hear him speak about the Pope's teaching. So we're going to have an opportunity to do that in a moment. And it is particularly good for me to speak to Austen about these things because Austen's a great supporter of refugees, and I personally have been very grateful for the Pope's prophetic leadership on issues around refugees. We've also, we have a refugee who's been welcomed through a community sponsorship programme, and she's going to share some of her own experience of what that was like to be welcomed. And we've got three people who will speak from different faith traditions, really picking up on the theme that Pope Francis speaks about in his book. And they'll speak about their own experience of welcoming refugees, what that's meant to them, or why their faith believes that that's so important. Now, as you heard there just a minute ago, I'm the director of the Jesuit Refugee Service in the UK, and we support 350 destitute asylum seekers and ordinarily a similar number in immigration detention. And it's been a very challenging 12 months with COVID, and we've seen a real situation of emergency for the people who we support. And a lot of the themes I think that I'll be able to speak to Austen about, and I hope that will come up in terms of what the Pope's been saying to us about COVID as a moment of choosing and how it reveals something really important about the way in which our society is structured, is something I know that I've seen very clearly in my own work. But I want to begin first of all by welcoming Bishop Paul McAleenan. I've known Bishop Paul for more than 20 years, from when he was my parish priest in Hackney. He had a great impact on me, actually, in terms of teaching me the importance of faith and the connection between faith and justice. It had a very important formative role in my own life. And I want to invite Bishop Paul, who is the lead bishop on issues around refugees and migration, to say something of his reflections on the Pope's teaching in this book, and to also to say a prayer for us, just to set us off. So Bishop Paul, if I can hand over to you, perhaps you can turn your video and sound on.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you to UK refugees for this evening in which we have the opportunity to be together and to speak to each other and learn from each other. And I see we have 111 participants, And I'm sure you're all representatives of all our communities, so you're all very welcome. And as Sarah says, I shall begin with a prayer. God of love, show us our place in this world as channels of your love. For all the creatures of this earth, for not one of them is forgotten in your sight. Enlighten those who possess power and money, that they may avoid the sin of indifference, that they may love the common good, advance the weak, and care for this world in which we live. My reflections on Let Us Dream. I can't remember the last time a publication captured the imagination in the way Let Us Dream has done. And of course, like all good literature, it makes you think of other things you have read. And while reading Let Us Dream, quite a few times, some words of Jesus came to my mind. If anyone has ears to hear, let them listen. Jesus ended some of his great parables with those words. He was not speaking to those who had ears, but those who had ears to hear. That is, those who are truly seeking understanding, who are unafraid of the truth, and are willing to be open to the Spirit which reveals the truth, and are prepared to assist in implementing the demands of truth and justice. Let Us Dream, as Pope Francis indicates, is for the whole world. It is his gift to everyone, but especially to those who have ears to hear. I do not think there's anyone who could read Let Us Dream and not be impressed by the beauty of its prose, the depth of the insights, the sincerity of the Pope's convictions. One, I think, indeed, would have to be quite dull not to be impressed with Let Us Dream. However, and I think this is very important, in Mark's Gospel, chapter 6, there is a story of how King Herod once went to listen to St. John the Baptist preaching. And the story concludes with the words, "He was perplexed when he heard John speaking, and yet he liked to listen to him." The words and the vision of Pope Francis are attractive and inspirational, but they need to be translated into reality, not just listened to. The subtitle, "The Path to a Better Future," shows that it is not just a dream, but it involves a journey, and we are at the starting point. And like a true prophet, like all true prophets, Pope Francis points to the presence of the movement of the Spirit, calling us to a new way of thinking and relating. He speaks of the self-defeating isolation of individualism, summed up very poetically with the words, "We have to flow out of my own little lagoon into the broad river of a reality of which I am a part." And of course, the Pope tells us to achieve that, there are two political positions which have to be rejected. The belief that the progress of humanity is measured by economic progress. The progress of humanity is not measured by economic progress. And secondly, we have to reject that insular nationalist populism, which plays upon fear and suspicion, which results in my country versus the rest of the world. The pandemic, as the Pope says, provided a revelation, but it's not a private revelation. It's not a revelation for a few people. It's a revelation for everyone, an unveiling of the undeniable reality, not only that there is injustice, inequality, and deprivation, but those who are often rejected or occupy a lowly position transpire to be the most important. It reminds me of the psalm which says, It was the stone rejected by the builders that became the cornerstone. And of course, the Pope gives a list of those in ancillary tasks on whom we relied. And this revelation of the true state of the world demands a shift in attitude, how we perceive others, but also a shift in perspective, a different approach, which ensures, as the Pope says, that everyone will have a place at the table. I think that's a beautiful expression. Yeah. Everyone in the world will have a place at the table. We need an approach so that everyone will be assured that they will have what is needed to live a dignified life, and not just hope that someone in a position of power will throw them a few crumbs. At one level, it is very easy to subscribe to the philosophy of let us dream. Easy to feel compassion for the Uyghurs, the Yazidis, the Rohingya, whom the Pope mentions, because they're far away. We all feel compassion for them. But what about migrants and refugees? What about those migrants and refugees who are not very far from us this evening, only a few miles away in northern France or Kent, or even the middle of the English Channel? And this is where we see if that beautiful dream of the Pope really touches us, if it moves us and motivates us. UK Welcomes Refugees has seen the situation, they have made a choice, and it is acting, campaigning on behalf of migrants and refugees, making the dream of fraternity a reality. And this brings us to the heart of the Pope's hope, that we too be willing to participate in building the new city, a new world post-COVID. Let us dream is for everyone, though I think for it to be effective, it is better to say it is for each individual. It is for me personally. And to finish, I wish to mention three principles which Pope Francis speaks of in his encyclical Laudato Si', where he is addressing the issue of caring for the earth. Three principles which can be applied to many situations, including the present one. And those three principles are: everything is gift, everything is fragile, everything is connected. Everything is gift. You are a gift. The life of a migrant or a refugee is a gift. Health is a gift. All has to be protected. Everything is fragile. Well, don't we know that so well now? Everything really is fragile. Our health is fragile. Ecosystems are fragile. Livelihoods are fragile. They need to be protected too. And everything is connected. We are all connected. Everything is interdependent. Humanity is connected, whether we like it or not. And our decisions and our actions can have an adverse effect on others. For example, if we in the West do not care for the climate and the temperatures rise, coastal regions on the other side of the world will be flooded. Water levels rise. And those who make their living off the sea or on the land close to the coast become internally displaced persons. They might have to migrate, and then they end up at the English Channel. And then it becomes a political problem. So Let Us Dream really does speak to everyone. Our actions have to display solidarity with all people, especially those on the edges, helping them to reach their full potential. Not as a favor. We don't do it as a favor. We don't do it simply because we have something left over. Not just out of welfareism. We do it because they are children of God. They have a dignity that cannot be denied and must never be undermined. So I'm really grateful to the Holy Father for his book, Let Us Dream, A Path to the Better Future, and the inspiration that he has placed within our hearts.
Thank you, Bishop Paul, for that lovely introduction and overview of what the book means to you. It's my great pleasure now to introduce Ala Mohammed, who has spoken before at a number of meetings about her own experience of being welcomed as a refugee. She comes from Idlib in Syria, and after living for a number of years in Jordan, she and her husband and her 3 young daughters were welcomed and resettled, actually by the project that Jackie, who's going to speak later, was involved with. So we've got kind of 2 halves, if you like, of the same story. But I thought it was really important that we began with Alam's story, because it's really important to hear what it's like to be welcomed and to centre all that we are doing, I think, on the experience of a refugee speaking themselves. So hand over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Sorry if I made some mistake, because I am a little nervous. Is this level good, Sarah?
It's perfect.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Ahlam, and I am from Idlib in Syria. I am in England with my husband and our 3 daughters. My parents and my brothers are still in Idlib. My city isn't very big. It is in a farming area with lots of olive groves and cherry trees. It was beautiful, but bombs have destroyed most of it now. My husband and I went to Jordan to be safe. The life was very hard there, and I missed my family. There are many thousands of Syrians in Jordan. They have no home now, and they can't go back to Syria. We felt we had no future there. Fortunately, the United Nations organization helped us, but we had to wait to hear any news. We had lots of meetings with them. They explained about community sponsorship, where a local community would help us to settle in a new place. They said there was a group in the Catholic Church in Sutton in South London, and they were mostly old people. Did we mind that? Our answer was no problem at all. My husband has Christian friend from his school days. The United Nations people arranged our flights, and that went smoothly. We had received photographs of the Sutton group. Their name were writing underneath, and we felt familiar with them even before we met them. It was sad to leave the friends we made in Jordan, but we knew that we would have a better life in England. We met our new friends at the airport and went to our new home and in the school minibus. Really, we couldn't believe that this house would be our home. We were here, we were happy. Our home is very comfortable and just right for our family. And most importantly, has a beautiful garden. We were very happy to meet all the members of the group. Every member of our group had a role, and all of them supported us. Really, they are our family in this country, because they did a very difficult job to make everything easy for us. They helped us in every way, finding the school for our children. In fact, the beautiful head teacher came to welcome us the first day when we arrived. Our new friends helped us to find our way. Doctor who spoke Arabic, a dentist taking us to the job center. We had a wonderful interpreter who helped us so much. The children loved the toys they found in our new home, but they missed their old friends. They were in school in the first week, and the teachers helped them to settle in. They are doing very, very well. They missed school during the lockdown. After 6 months, we had a party in the church hall and we met even more people in the community. There was a nice meal, and our neighbor baked a beautiful cake for us. I made some special Syrian cakes. Everyone said hello and made us feel at home. Before the virus came, I enjoyed joining a multicultural dance with my daughter at school concert. And with a friend, I cooked Syrian food for the party. Also, the Muslim Culture and Welfare Association invited me to ladies' social evening. During the pandemic, we are all sad that we haven't been able to see our friends in the group, just on the doorstep or on the phone. Now my husband has passed his driving test, and we have a car now. So we were so excited about that. We have met other Syrian families who have arrived through community sponsorship with the Salvation Army and the Wimbledon Synagogue Ark project. We like our neighborhood. Everything is close to our home. We have a lovely neighbors too. We hope our children have a good education and a good future in England. Frankly, our friends in the Sutton Deanery Group have helped us to rebuild all our lives and our future. We would like to thank them all for everything they did for us, and we look forward to seeing them face to face when the restrictions of this pandemic are lifted. Truly glory to them all. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Alan, for sharing your experience. I have to say, I find it so moving and uplifting to hear how positive an experience it has been to find a new family in the UK.
Yes, absolutely right.
You use those words, family and friends, interchangeably on several occasions. That was your experience of finding home.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I hope you'll be part of the panel when we come to the Q&A at the end, but thank you for grounding the discussion that Austen and I will now have in a real experience of what it means to one family. And
many thanks to you.
When we hear from Jackie, I'm sure we're going to hear about the ripple effects of the experience of welcoming you within the community within Sutton. So I shall look forward to picking that up in a moment. Thank you. I want to turn to Austen Ivereigh now, and Austen and I are going to have a bit of a conversation about the book Let Us Dream. I think many of you will know Austen. I know he's got some experience himself in community organising, as he may say something about in a minute, but really he's best known now as a biographer of the Pope, a leading follower of the Pope, Pope analyst, if you like. I found his books very helpful for explaining Pope Francis's teaching and making them accessible and placing them into context. So if I can ask Austen to turn his video and sound on, and then we can have a chat. I can't yet see Austen.
Already on, Sarah.
Oh, there you are. Excellent. Okay. Welcome, Austen.
Thank you. It's lovely to be with you all. Lovely to be with you. Peace be with you, everybody. Salam alaikum. Bishop Paul, thank you for your reflection. Alam, thank you for your great uplifting story. Sarah, great to be with you as always.
I wonder if you'd kick off by just saying something about the context of the book and just explain how it came about so that people understand, you know, what's the book about? Where does it fit into the other publications that Pope Francis has issued very recently that deal with perhaps some similar or relevant themes?
Sure. Yeah, this is the book. It's called Let Us Dream, The Path to a Better Future. It's a fairly slim book. It can be read really in a few hours, but people say that it's worth, you know, spending a lot of time on. It is it is a papal book in the sense that it's a book by the Pope in collaboration with a journalist, in this case with me. But it's unusual because I don't appear in the book. It's not a question and answer. It is the Pope speaking directly to humanity and specifically about the crisis that we are undergoing. So the first book, I suppose, really by a Pope in response to a crisis. And the way I describe it and the way it comes about, Sarah, is really that last year, as you know, this time last year at Easter, just before Easter really, the Pope was clearly deeply moved by what was happening and was giving some remarkable insights and observations. And I managed to secure an interview with him at Easter last year on the COVID crisis. Where is God in this? What does it mean? How do we navigate our way through it? How do we come out better? And that led to this book. So that we worked on the book then together over the summer, and it came out in December. And I guess the where does it fit in? Well, you know that really for the past 2 years, Francis has been very preoccupied with the state of the world and urging fraternity. And he had this great project with his friend, who's the head of the Al-Tayeb Institute in Cairo, Sheikh Al-Tayeb, great Muslim scholar. And he and Francis developed a friendship. And so throughout really 2019, Francis was saying to people, I have this dream with a friend. And that turned into the great Abu Dhabi document on human fraternity, which is a joint call by the Catholic leader of the world, the Christian leader of the world, the great Muslim leader, for all our faiths to join together in a massive, you know, if you like, attempt to recover fraternity. And that then became also, he developed that in his social encyclical in October, Fratelli Tutti. And this really is, I guess, a very personal reflection by the Pope on those two things. On the one hand, the crisis, on the other, the need for fraternity, to put fraternity at the heart of our thinking about economy, society, and politics.
So it's a dream of friendship. I mean, I one of the themes that came out really from the book for me was partly he doesn't attempt to collapse difference, does he? He says that difference must stand, that in a sense we've got to give that space to that for difference to mature. And yet friendship and working together, that's something that he still emphasizes as a way in which we can really heal the world.
It's about reconciled diversity is an expression that he uses often. It's about accepting us in our differences. We have deep convictions, we have religious, cultural, historical values, which are very important to us. And we don't have to trade those. We don't have to give those up. What we have to do is to come together, if you like, sometimes in tension and in disagreement, but to learn to travel together and allow God or the Holy Spirit, however you want to put it, into those disagreements and into those conflicts that allow us then to create a better future. So absolutely, it's a vision of fraternity which avoids both uniformity on the one hand, and on the other, if you like, the kind of relativistic, individualistic, you know, well, we all have our own opinion, don't we? Which is really a way of saying we don't care. This is a very different vision of unity where it's about coming together in disagreement, in difference, but traveling together, learning to understand and respect each other, and then, as it were, allowing us to find a new plane on which to work, which moves us beyond, if you like, all of our positions while preserving the best of them.
Kind of encounter and struggle. I mean, I really resonate with that actually with my own experience at JRS UK, where we're very definitely a Catholic organisation, and like the Pope, a Jesuit organisation, and yet Our staff include Muslims, Buddhists, people of, who are very committed Christians, people who are not, and yet we come together. And I have to say, listening particularly to Muslims speak about our Christian mission, I often learn a great deal, actually. I see it with fresh eyes listening to them speak about it. There was another theme I was really taken with in the book that I was quite keen to talk to you about, and that was about this theme that he has of COVID having revealed the structural injustices of the world and said something to us about the truth. And it's something I'd particularly noticed with the refugees and asylum seekers who we are supporting at JRS, who are destitute. And of course, the situation of emergency that was thrown up at the start of COVID meant that people were homeless, people who are sofa surfing in order just to keep a roof over their heads. We realized, of course, during COVID that puts not only them in danger, but everybody in danger. We've seen it again, actually, with some of the commentary today around access to vaccines, where for years and years there's been this attempt to stop people who are undocumented from accessing the health service. And now, of course, we need everybody to access the health service in order to be vaccinated, and you can't just turn that around. It's as if it's revealed an act of self-harm. And I what you thought about that.
No, that's exactly right. So I think when I first approached the Pope about this, I said to him, really what we need to understand is the process of change, the process of conversion. How can this crisis be a cause for us to make things better? And how conversely might we avoid, as it were, the grace or the opportunity of this and slip back? So really, I think the heart of the book is about how this change happens. Now, why is a crisis an opportunity, which we all know that it is? Well, it is because of what you've just said. It's the, if you like, the grace, to use very Christian language, the gift of being able to see more clearly. Now, one of the things that happens in a crisis like this, as the Pope says at the beginning of the book, is that our hearts are tested. In other words, we find out where our values really lie. So that's one way in which there's a grace. There's also a kind of a grace of interruption, in the sense that, you know, we can't go on as we were before. We can't just assume things. We have to open up to new ways of thinking. But above all, it's this grace of seeing. It's the revelation. And Francis, you know, talks about this a lot in the book. And in respect of refugees and migrants, one of the things he says very early on is, you know, you have to see what happens when COVID gets into a refugee camp. Now, we all know that people live, you know, crushed like sardines in refugee camps. But if you can try and imagine what it's like, you know, to have COVID in a refugee camp, suddenly those conditions seem, you know, they take on a very different tone, don't they? They become, one sees it in a new way. And again, what you've just been saying, you know, until everybody is vaccinated, we're all unsafe. So there's this shared vulnerability, this shared experience of fragility, which helps us, as it were, move in a more fraternal direction if we're able to open out and embrace it. Of course, we can also have the opposite reaction, which is to turn inwards. That's why none of this is automatic, and that's why we need spiritual guidance. Actually, we need help at this time from Pope Francis and other religious leaders to help us to do the things that, as it were, God is prompting us to do, and avoid the things which prevent us from receiving these gifts.
It's really as Pope Francis as the world's spiritual director again, isn't it? He's really determined to help us to learn the lessons of this enormous global crisis. The other theme that comes out very strongly is that this is a time of choosing. And I hear those words of scripture that I place before you, life and death. I hear that over and over again. And I often reflect back on last year, where it seemed as if the first half of the year, a lot of hostile policies towards asylum seekers were swept away when we suddenly realized that actually we had to do something. We housed people, we emptied out the detention centers, we stopped reporting, all sorts of things changed in the first half. And then there was this retreat again in the second half of last year to really barbaric treatment of people crossing in the Channel that Bishop Paul was referring to in his opening remarks about, you know, how do we welcome the people sometimes who are closest to us? You know, we've seen now people placed into military barracks where COVID is running rampant, and, you know, just appalling treatment. So we've seen kind of two sides of the same of the same thing, but you know, the choice, one appears to be for life and one for death. And
yeah, well, the Pope interestingly gave a speech today to the diplomats at the Vatican, normally given a month ago, but had to be delayed because of COVID. And he said, you know, the pandemic has shed light on the risks and the consequences of a way of life dominated by selfishness and a culture of waste. And it's set before us a choice, either to continue on the road we have followed until now or set out on a new path. That's the choice that you referred to. And of course, he said also in this very important speech, he was reviewing the year, and he said, well, yeah, last year we saw, of course, an increase in migration as a result of the closing of, but who, as a result of closing of borders, had to resort to ever more dangerous travel routes, which have been met with, you know, borders closing. So the crisis at the moment, you know, we have this eruption, if you like, of vulnerability and fraternity and solidarity. On the other hand, you have this closing down of borders. You have this rise of nationalism and national populism, which seeks to scapegoat migrants. All of this the Pope kind of talks about, you know, in the book. He said, you know, one of the things that we've seen in this crisis, for example, is our dependence on vulnerable, you know, on often very poorly paid migrant workers in care homes. Yeah, and yet precisely because they're poorly paid, you know, there's and often in a very vulnerable situation, that then makes them more at risk of the pandemic, which then poses a greater risk to us. So we have this light and dark. We have this. I mean, in Jesuit spiritual language, we say, here's the good spirit, you know, inviting us, and then here's the bad spirit trying to undermine it. We have both. But the point about the crisis is that the choice, as you said, becomes clearer. And in that sense, there's hope, because where there's clarity, there's a greater chance of doing the right thing.
There's something also that came out from the book for me about kind of doing something specific, and actually when you reflect on the state of the world, it can be a bit paralyzing, and yet turning to an individual, acting with friendship and love towards an individual in an individual situation in front of you, looking, seeing, discerning in front of you. And I guess that was something that came out very strongly from Arlam's contribution there, about the kind of the joy and the friendship and the fruitfulness, to use another word that came out in the book there, from Arlam's story. And I imagine we'll pick some of that up from our contributions from the panelists in a moment.
Yeah, I mean, the Pope's famous 4 words to say, you know, how should we respond to migrants, refugees, the stranger in general? Yeah, welcome, protect, promote, integrate. They're all action words. Yeah, they all require commitment at a political level, at a local level, at a personal level. We have to, you know, we either do those 4 things or we don't. You know, it's kind of fairly simple. So I think the call for action, which, you know, you make so powerfully, Sarah, from the JRS, and now UK welcomes refugees with the community sponsorship programs. I mean, these are all, I think, ways in which we concretely build a different kind of society and a different kind of future, which starts from fraternity rather than sovereignty, rather than how do we protect ourselves against other people. And this is the great sort of invitation that the Pope is making in this book and in these very in all these various speeches, documents, and so on. You know, we have to develop this awareness that we're either all saved together or no one is saved. I mean, this is the time to realize that our climate crisis, you know, the arms trade, the massive inequality, hunger, all these things have to be confronted and have to be faced. And of course, you say it's very easy, and the Pope says in the book, it's very easy to be overwhelmed by these challenges. But of course, what is the COVID crisis also showing us? You know, we have some states are capable of paying out very large sums of money to keep businesses going. We've seen homeless people being put up in hotels, and the kind of measures that so in a strange way, even though we've seen the inefficacy of states and governments, we've also seen a willingness, you know, where people want to do these things, they can be done. And I think that's one of the great lessons of this crisis.
Yes. And the kind of invitation to specific action as a way in which God breaks through into history. That's a kind of theme that seems to come out. And so the spirit of that joy that you pick up from from Alam's story, that gives you that sense of it. It feels like the complete antidote to the heaviness of the hostility.
You have to take one step, don't you? You have to almost go out of yourself. And the Pope says at the end, transcending and decentering are the words that he uses. Yeah, if you're moved by what you hear, then sure, pray about it, reflect about it, find out about it. But above all, act, go out there, offer yourself, make yourself a gesture of, even though you have no idea what you're offering, you have no idea whether you have any ability, you don't know what your means are, but just that going out of yourself and that offering of yourself, that gift, that's what creates the bonds of fraternity. That's what changes everything.
And trust that God can do something with that.
Because God does, that's the only way God can act in a strange way is, when the Pope says at the beginning of Let Us Dream, he says, it's not like we've been given the world and we've been told, look, there it is, get on with it. We are, to some extent, co-creators. In every flood, there is a Noah's Ark waiting to take us to a different future if we're willing to climb aboard and willing to do things differently.
And co-creators with people from different faiths.
And this time is a time where we build, one of the things about globalization and this moment is that we build our future with all our disparate elements and our disparate culture, our different way. It is through the reconciliation of our diversity that we create that new future. That's right. And there's no turning back. And this is, by the way, another very important lesson from the book. The Pope worries by the fact there are people that are just kind of battening down the hatches, waiting for the storm to pass so they can try and go back to what was. It's not happening. Crises like these, the Pope says, always change you. The question is whether they change you for the better or for the worse, but you can't go back. And one of the things that we must all now live with and face is that incredibly rich diversity. And how do we take that diversity, that difference, and turn it into something very fruitful?
That's a wonderful introduction to the book. Thank you very much, Austen. I hope that's whetted many people's appetites to read the book. I now want to begin the first of our three panelists who are going to speak from different traditions about their experience of welcoming, or what welcoming refugees means within their own faith tradition. And I want to start with Jackie McLaughlin, who is the project manager of Sutton Deanery Refugee Community Sponsorship Group. They were the first group in Southwark Diocese to resettle a Syrian family, and more to the point, they were the group who resettled Alam. So Jackie will be able to speak about what it was like to be on the other side, to be the people who welcomed, and not just the person who was welcomed. So Jackie, can I invite you to turn your camera on and to say something of your experience?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me okay, Sarah? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, reflecting on Pope Francis' book, Let Us Dream, I found encouragement with his opening words. I see this as a time of reckoning. And he stresses that in a crisis, you have to make choices. You have to rethink your priorities. Dream big, he says. And what do we hope for? And commit to act in our daily life on what we have dreamed, something that Austen's just been talking about. There was a moment of reckoning for me when I saw that little photograph of that little boy on the Mediterranean shore. That was a challenge. What am I going to do about it? Pope Francis made a call then for every parish to welcome a refugee family. I kind of thought that was a bit of a tall order, but with the 8 Catholic parishes in Sutton, I thought we could do something. And we did. We got together to welcome the stranger, and welcoming a family appealed to us. With the support of our bishop and the local clergy, we started to plan, and the community sponsorship scheme, not long out with the government, just seemed the right route for us to take. It took a few months, of course, to put everything in place. Welcoming takes a bit of planning. But what was a surprise was it wasn't as difficult as I feared. And I want to encourage people to take the plunge and to do it the way we did. We found that people were really pleased to help. Our team that we made, a small team of people, brought their skills and experience and enthusiasm to offer different tasks, from finding a house, getting it furnished, to holding a fundraising event. And we have a member who organised an afternoon tea for over 100 people. Super. And we reached a wider welcoming community too. The local council officers, the college for ESOL classes, the Catholic schools who came up real trumps offering school places, and one junior school, their children raised funds in a cake sale. You know, other churches too helped us, like the Bunker Youth Group in Sutton. They raised money for broadband. A local Muslim shopkeeper dropped the price of a laptop. We wanted to buy one in preparation when he heard what we were doing it for. Our local refugee network supported us, and we got advice from other community sponsorship groups too. The Catholic group in Salford advised us, and the local Salvation Army. They had a family here. Well, we were soon approved for a family of 5. It took a few months, but we were approved to have a family of 5. Now to the important part, the arrival at the airport on a very rainy day in May. Dad, Mum, and the 3 little girls from Jordan, and you've already met Atlam. We'd exchange photos. I think she explained that we'd exchange photos. So what was nice was when she came through the gate, we recognized each other and gave each other a wave. So that, and a smile. The interpreter was a great help, of course. And we went to the school minibus and drive back to their house. And I think you heard Atlam say that she couldn't believe that it was their house. They were amazed. And looking around the house, the little girls opening all the kitchen cupboards and things like that, and then finding the toys in the living room. And one member cooked a meal that was ready for the oven. You know, Dad asked who owned everything in the house, and through an interpreter, we said, well, now you do, which was rather nice, of course. The teachers from the school knocked to say welcome, and they've been absolutely terrific that the school helped us. We went around the next day, no interpreter then, and I thought, gosh, what'll we do? So I decided to sing. Used to singing with little ones, and I sang "The Wheels on the Bus Go Round and Round," and the little girls were just doing this. Well, the next day I went again, and what happened was, little bus gets put on the table in front of me, and the children sit down, fold arms, and wait for me to begin. And then Mum turned on the internet, and she'd found the wheels on the bus on the internet, and they'd been practicing it. I thought, clever Mum, you've done that. And we soon got going. And the end of that story is a week later, when Atlam actually caught a bus with her children. What did they do? They sat on the bus and they started singing and doing the actions. I think she was a bit embarrassed about that. Now, how have things got on? The girls were in school, as she's told you. There was a home tutor for Mum. Dad went to classes. The Bangladeshi man from the print shop took Dad to the mosque for the first time the first week. The family settled well, and we tried to be careful to give them support, but also to give them space. Just a small number of us visited on a rota and helped with the usual things, accompanying them to the job centre, to the GP. Pope Francis often talks about accompanying people, and that's been our way too. We've done other things, a welcome party, I think Atlam told you about. We've shared days out to London, to parks, shopping trips. And what about their achievements too, their own achievements? Dad has passed an English exam, and he's passed his theory and practical driving test the first time, and that was a great excitement for all the family. Atlam has, she's done several speaking engagements for which I thank her, and well, not least, she's spoken at the Migrant Mass at Westminster Cathedral a couple of years ago. What else can I say? Well, I'm coming near the end of my time, I see now, but I want to say that it's been a joy to accompany this lovely family. We haven't seen as much as we would like to this last year, but we hope when COVID is over that we can see more of each other and do more together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I love the story about the wheels on the bus, I have to say. I think that's as beautiful in terms of helping people to understand what it is to ride a bus, and also kind of sharing of culture, whether or not now you've taught the wheels on the bus, whether or not that that song gets into your ear and you can just never get it out again. So maybe they won't be quite so grateful. I want now to invite Rabbi Danny Rich to say something about his experience of welcoming refugees. Rabbi Danny is a former senior rabbi and chief executive of Liberal Judaism, and he's also a board member of UK Welcomes Refugees, and he was the first joint chair of the National Refugee Welcome Board, which pioneered the idea of community sponsorship of refugees back in 2015. I know he's got some personal experience to share. So Danny, can I ask you to turn your camera on?
I have, but it doesn't seem to be working.
You're there, I can see you.
Oh, great, because I can't see me. Okay. So friends, it's a great privilege to be asked in this workshop by UK Welcomes Refugees, which, as we've heard, is a new organisation committed to the growth of community sponsorship of refugees. The moving prophetic work, Let Us Dream, The Path to a Better Future, which was published under the imprimatur of His Holiness Pope Francis in crisis in 2020. You've probably guessed that I'm not a Catholic. Indeed, I'm a Jew. And it's both as a Jew and a human being that I was called to action on behalf of refugees early fleeing the Syrian civil war. The overwhelming majority of Syrians are, of course, Muslim. But I'm proud that in my former role as senior rabbi of Liberal Judaism in the United Kingdom, Ireland, and Denmark, I was able to facilitate the only example in the world, I suspect, of a Muslim family finding refuge and residence in a flat, in a synagogue, a liberal synagogue in South London, which, by the way, had been founded by members of my own family some 90 years ago. When Pope Francis pleads, "Let ourselves be touched by others' pain," and observes, "Uprooting can be healing, a radical makeover," I am reminded of the foundational story of Jewish peoplehood, the biblical book of Exodus. It begins with the successful settlement of a Hebrew family, that of Jacob and Joseph in Egypt, who become, quote, fertile and prolific. Yet, according to the Hebrew Bible, a new king arrives who enslaves the Hebrew people until their dramatic rescue by the one God, who is eternally on the side of the poor and abused, even when oppressors and their regimes think otherwise. The biblical Exodus is probably the most well-known story in the world, but in accord with biblical instruction, from it the Jew learns two fundamental principles: compassion and love. It is the very experience of the Jewish people which obligates the individual Jew both positively and negatively. In Exodus 23:9 we read, "You shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the feelings of a stranger, having been strangers yourselves in the land of Egypt." Yet abstention from selfishness or cruelty is not sufficient, as Pope Francis implies in his call for fraternity. The Hebrew Bible further declares, "Love your neighbor as yourself, or as you would wish to be loved," which is interestingly spelt out in some detail 15 verses later. Quote, Leviticus 19, verse 33 and 34. "When a stranger resides with you in your land, you shall not wrong him or her. The stranger who resides with you shall be as one of your citizens. You shall love the stranger as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt." Indeed, you might ask, what if I've always been fortunate? What if I'm not party to personal or historical experience of marginalization? In its earliest chapters, the Hebrew Bible is again clear. You will recall the murder of Abel by his brother Cain. In Genesis chapter 4, verse 8, we read, God says to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" And Abel says, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" This remarkable exchange begins with God asking a question to which God presumably already knows the answer. The human in the story, Cain, then tells a lie. He knows exactly where his brother is. He's just killed him. And then responds with a question to which no answer is given. Why does God not respond to, "Am I my brother's keeper?" I suggest because as Cain knows the answer in his day, so do we in ours. Are we the keepers of our human brothers and sisters? Yes. And of such a world in which we are each other's keepers, in the words of Pope Francis, of just such a world in which we are each other's keepers, let us dare to dream. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny, for that really powerful and inspiring reflection. I'm very grateful for that, and picking up on some texts that have been very important for me, I have to say, in my role. I want now to invite Dr. Mohammed Abdul Bari to speak. Just before I do, I just want to mention, if you would like to ask a question of the panelists, when Dr. Bari has finished, we'll have some time for discussion and Q&A. So if you put your questions into the chat, and then I'm hoping the person who's helping with technology is going to help me to filter them through, because it's very difficult for me to concentrate and also pick them up. So we will ask lots of questions, and then we'll have lots of possibility for things that we can raise. Now, Dr. Bari is a physicist, a writer, a teacher, and a community leader. And he's the former secretary of Muslim Aid, former chairman of East London Mosque, and former general secretary of the Muslim Council of Britain, and the former president of the Islamic Forum of Europe. So very esteemed, and you're very welcome. Thank you very much for being with us, and we'd love to hear what you have to say about Let Us Dream.
Thank you, Sarah. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, and good evening, everyone. First of all, many thanks to UK Welcome Refugees, especially my friends Bekele and Neil for organizing this event. I recently read the timely and precious book, Let Us Dream, The Path to a Better Future. Austen has discussed about this a bit, which was co-authored by Pope Francis and Austen Ivereigh. The book shares the same theme as this event and came out of Pope Francis's reflection on COVID-19. We are still in the midst of a tumultuous time which has created an unparalleled global mayhem in public health and economy. Sadly, the fatality rate in our own country is one of the highest in the world. Pope Francis talks about his personal reflection on the inequality and cruelty of our society in the book's prologue. However, he also says, I quote, an overflow of mercy is spilling out in our midst. In the UK, we have seen great examples from ordinary people of empathy and compassion for fellow human beings in their difficulties. Although COVID-19 may be in the spotlight today, we must not lose sight of other global crises we face. The increasing displacement of people and the loss of basic human dignity as a result has only increased over the past decade. According to the UNHCR, forced displacement of people has surpassed 80 million in mid-2020. Amongst them, 45.7 million are internally displaced people, 29.6 million are refugees, and 4.2 million are asylum seekers. I commend UK Welcome's refugees as they highlight their plight and promote, protect, and build a powerful community sponsorship movement in the UK, working closely with partners, associates, and allies. There is so much more that needs to be done. Sadly, the Home Office do not yet include the Rohingya families as appropriate for sponsorship. It's time all communities come forward more vigorously to sponsor all refugees from all communities and urge the Home Office to help us. In my country of birth, Bangladesh, There are now over 1.1 million Rohingya people. They were evicted and ethnically cleansed with unparalleled brutality from Myanmar's Rakhine province. I am a witness to the first refugee batch of more than 200,000 who came to Bangladesh in 1978. Another batch of similar numbers came in 1991. And the last batch of 700,000 faced killing, rape, and genocidal eviction in 2017, just a few years ago, when Aung San Suu Kyi was Myanmar's civilian leader. The world is rightly worried about the recent Myanmar coup and the arrest of Suu Kyi and their civilian leaders. It shows how ruthless the military has been and how naive, or some say, cold-hearted Suu Kyi was when the military initiated the destruction of the Rohingya in 2017. In 2018, February, I visited Myanmar and met groups of Rohingya and Burmese Muslims. After coming back, I published a book named The Rohingya Crisis, A People Facing Extinction. In it, I also highlighted the continuous Chinese support for the Myanmar military. On top of many crises, the world is also watching with horror the plight of the Uyghur Muslims in China's Xinjiang province. An estimated 1 million are in concentration camps. Just a few days ago, the BBC reported Uyghur women being systematically raped, sexually abused, and tortured in China's self-designated re-education camp. All this may cause defeatism and anger, but as stewards of God on earth and people of faith, we must have faith in people's inherent goodness. Pope Francis mentions in page 15 of his book, and I quote, "What the Lord asks of us today is a culture of service, not a throwaway culture." This chimes with the concept of servant leadership that Islam's prophet, peace be upon him, gave us. He says, the leader of the people is the one who serves them. In Arabic, it's called Sayyid al-Qawm Khadimuhum. Let's all try to make our world better. Many thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barry. I'm so pleased you picked up particularly on the issue of Uyghurs, who Pope Francis describes as very dear to his heart, and he's raised that issue on a number of occasions. So thank you so much. We've got some time now for questions, and have a kind of, there's an invisible person behind who you can't see who's been sorting out questions for me so that I can actually raise them. And there's a number of questions actually that pick up on the very difficult issue of the role of religion itself sometimes in causing migration and actually leading to persecution. I remember feeling some of that tension when I went to visit the Middle East. So when we have obviously an all faith panel this evening, and Pope Francis speaks very movingly about the role of faiths working together. But of course, sometimes there is another component, is there not, of religion in the mix, particularly around forced migration. I'm just wondering what the rest of the panel might have to say on that. Can I perhaps start with Austen and see whether or not he has something to say about what the Pope says about that?
Yeah, I mean, the document on human fraternity that I started with, that Pope Francis signed with Sheikh Al-Tayeb, was really about countering two misuses of religion. On the one hand, religion harnessed to fundamentalism and extremism and terrorism. On the other hand, the manipulation of religion by national populists who want to try and claim that they're protecting an identity. And Francis is very clear in Let Us Dream, about migration doesn't dilute the religion of a country. That's not how it works. Britain isn't a less country because it accepts Muslim refugees, but rather the opposite. That is actually how our faith is put into practice. So yeah, there is a distortion of religion that is perennial and constant, which true religion always has to stand up against. And that's why this. That's why tonight, to have Rabbi Rich, Dr. Barry, us all in this conversation, these moments are very important. This is true religion.
But I guess religion can also sometimes be a source of conflict as well, which can also lead to displacement. Rabbi Danny, have you got anything that you want to add on that?
Well, It's not religion that causes the conflict, it's human beings and how they interpret their faith. And the truth of the matter is religious leaders also have to stand up to bigotry within their own faiths. And that requires courage from Jews, Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, all sorts of people. It's very rare that you find a faith that somewhere isn't persecuting somebody else, really, in the name of, as it were. So it's possible to find Jewish persecutors, Christian persecutors, Muslim persecutors, Buddhist persecutors. It's also equally able to find Christian victims, Muslim victims, and some of them are against each other, some of them are intra and some of them are inter. So what we have to do is we have to have the courage to say, and by the way, we also have to acknowledge that some of our faiths say things which today we wouldn't be proud of, because they were written 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. You know, my tradition is not very nice about Canaanites, if one could work out who they were, but that's not the issue today. The issue today is, and I suspect, and I read the Quran, and I read the Christian scriptures, and I read the Hebrew Bible, the overwhelming motif is about a celebration of diversity and difference and a commonality of humankind. That's why and I will finish here, why the Jewish Midrash says, why did God, according to tradition, create only one Adam and Eve and not, you know, one over there and one over there and one over there, in order that no person in the future could claim that their heritage was better than the next person's. And if you accept, as I do, that my heritage is common, ultimately, of course it's different, I have a different history, but my DNA, if you like, as far as I understand it, is shared with Muhammad and shared with Jackie and shared with Austen in the same way, but differently than it is with anybody else. If that's the basis on which we start our faith journey, then faith can be a cause not of conflict, but of the celebration of diversity.
Before I come to Dr. Bari, I actually want to ask Alam, because she was speaking in her contribution about how her husband had many Christian friends in Syria. I wonder if she might say something about that.
Is she there?
Is Alam there?
Yes, I'm here.
I think we've lost her. I might come back to her in a moment, but it was one of the.
She's there. She's there, Sarah. She's there.
Yeah. When my husband has worked in Jordan, he recognized for people a Christian friend. Sorry.
Can I help you, Atlam? I remember him speaking to me about a school friend he had, and they were friends at school, and they remained friends. And I remember he told me that after the war started, his Christian friend who had a flat in Idlib that was kind of spare offered it to one of your husband's family. Oh, I remember he told me that.
I'm so sorry, Jackie. I can't remember. I'm so sorry.
Okay, that's okay. I remember Rayad telling me. Okay. Yeah. And I remember him saying he went into the Christian church too. I think it was probably an Orthodox church in Idlib. I remember he telling me he did that one time with his friend.
Yeah.
Also, can I just say something, Sarah?
Of course, yeah.
Lots of times we have issues and problems. I haven't talked about those, but when we do, Atlam and I sitting together sometime working out a difficulty, or something happens and it's sorted, I always look at her and I say, thank God. And we both smile at each other and we kind of share a feeling that God is helping her and helping us. We do share that quite often, don't we, Atlam?
Yeah.
I've always been very struck when I've met, particularly when I met refugees in the Middle East, when I was working with Charis International, about the sheer pain often of in conflicts of neighbours turning on one another and people who were friends, and sometimes divisions that were created that were became religious that may not always have been religious. but the sheer pain of neighbours and friends turning on one another, trauma of that,
Yes.
that seems very pervasive, that travels with people. Dr. Bari, I don't know, have you any reflections on this point about?
No, thanks, Danny and Austin. They have more or less answered what I would have been saying. When religion becomes mechanical rituals without any message and teachings and spirit, then any religion can be doing anything. And religious people, not religion, I fully agree. After in 22nd May 2013, Lee Rigby was murdered by 2 Nigerian young Muslims, and one of the mosques in Maswell Hill was torched down. And I know the local synagogue gave them shelter, and I visited it twice. I prayed prayer there. So this is the attitude, and this is the real message of religious people. Those who kill people, innocent people, or without any cause from any religion, or probably from nationalistic and other causes, they are a different category of people. No religion has any monopoly of goodness or evilness. At the end of the day, these are the people who make religion good or worse. So I think the message, teachings, and spirit of why religion was revealed and should be taken preference rather than just mechanical rituals. Of course, rituals are important. I'm not denying that, but it should not be just mechanical. There should be spirit behind it. In fact, God has created human beings and diversified for a purpose. And in the Quran, God says that if I wish, then I could create the whole human being as one community. So that's a wonderful message in every religion, especially the Abrahamic faiths. Thanks.
Thank you. We've got a set of questions that are asking really about how we make structural change. How can we both be most powerful advocates? One speaks about Pope Francis speaking about the need for advocacy alongside a humanitarian response. We've had some questions about how we can make the case that asylum seekers should not be held in such inhumane conditions as the military barracks. How do we make a change, for example, on issues around welcoming unaccompanied children and the frustration of the Dubs Amendment being lost? So there's a set of questions that are coming, which is about how do we make change? This is a good question for a group of people, which includes lots of community organisers. So I want to pick on that theme before perhaps talking about something more specific. Danny, I'm going to come to you first. How do you think we work together best to make change?
Well, you make change by starting with yourself. And I remember I first got involved with Muslims in an intimate way after 9/11, when I made the decision to go to my local mosque on the basis, it was the one in Croydon, on the basis that I felt that Muslims were fairly targeted. And when I heard that a Muslim that I was acquainted with felt reluctant to go on the tube with his rucksack because everybody looked at him and think he was a bomber. And it actually was it was quite a hostile meeting, I must say. It wasn't the most comfortable meeting for me, but I stuck it out deliberately. And I afterwards went to speak to a young man who'd appeared to be leading a group of what were pretty outspoken young people, who was actually a young imam, relatively naive in my view, but a young imam. And the irony is that the following week I met him in a church where we were at an interfaith event, and he clearly was completely out of his depth in a church. And I helped him and explained to him what you do in a church and how you do it. I mean, I'm a Jew, of course, but what you do in a church and how you do it and all those things. And from there on, we built up a friendship and a relationship. And the point I'm making is that we ourselves are examples and exemplars. And we have to begin, as Jackie did with her group, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, or in her case it was 100, I don't remember how many, making a decision to make a difference. And that to me is the beginning. Now, it isn't the end. It needs MPs like you, Sarah. We worked together on some issues when you were a member of Parliament, but I'm not in your political party. I'm a councillor for a different party, but it doesn't mean we didn't work together on things that were right and important. And we need our politicians, and we need our religious leaders, and we need our all sorts of people who see the things in the way that we see them. And the Pope, in my view, is right to say, and that's why UK Welcome Refugees exists, by the way. It doesn't exist to do the on-the-ground work that Jackie is doing, important that is. It doesn't exist to do the work that my synagogue is doing in hosting a Muslim family. It's advocating for change at the immigration system, whereby community sponsorship and civil society takes a role alongside government and local authorities in making refugees welcome in this country. And so it's about individuals and about using political power and partnerships across the board, mosques, synagogues, secular people, to do small things and advocate for larger changes.
Thank you. Bishop Paul, I wonder if you're still there. You took me, I remember, to my first telco meeting when I was in your parish many, many years ago. My first experience of community organising. I wonder whether or not you might have some reflections from your perspective about how do people come together to make change, to create change?
Very good question. I'll give you two experiences. After being parish priest in Clapton, where we first met, I became parish priest in Watford. And in Watford, about 300 meters from the church, there was a mosque. On one Lent, I decided I would like the Catholics in our parish to visit the local mosque. I contacted the imam and I said, would you welcome Catholics to the mosque to introduce us to Islam? Show us the mosque. I took 120 Catholics to the Ring Road Mosque in Watford, and never have I experienced such hospitality. They were so apologetic that they couldn't provide even more hospitality. Locally is where it happens. There must be a willingness to cross the divide. Secondly, another experience, I also come from a place not noted for good relations between religions. I come from Belfast. And when I was a young man growing up, I lived night and day through gun battles and bombs because of the hostility between Catholics and Protestants. It wasn't a war between religions, it was essentially political, but it was divided along religious lines. And at that time, I met a young man and we were discussing religion. Basically, for those who do not know on this gathering this evening, I, as a Catholic, believe one becomes a Catholic through baptism. And this Protestant said to me, no, baptism doesn't make you a Christian. It is following Jesus makes you a Christian. And he caused me to think. I'd been going to Mass every Sunday, and never in a sermon had I heard anything that made me think. And here was a Belfast Protestant layperson who made me think, what does it mean to be a Christian? Is it baptism or is it following Jesus? I tell you that story because one of the greatest things we can do for another is provoke them into thinking, to give them another perspective. And that can only take place through dialogue. It is at a local level, and to come back to Citizens UK and the telco meeting, it was a local level, getting people together with a common interest to enable them to advocate what will enable a better life within the community. That is how one makes change, but it is essentially dialogue. It takes place at a local level. When people are together, they see they have a common interest, and together they can campaign and advocate on behalf of others.
Thank you very much. And hospitality is was a core part actually of many of the things that came up in a number of panelists' contributions this evening, actually, as being a place where encounter takes place and a place where relationships are formed. That's a really clear theme that came out. We're nearly coming towards the end, but I want to pick up on a really practical question. Someone says that they want to give time and help and support the organisation helping refugees arriving in the UK. That this particular person was speaking about Manchester, but Jackie, is someone who's really been involved in an organisation really from the foundations. Can you give any advice to this person who's saying, how do they get involved? What do they do? How can they engage their community and parish to help out? What should they do?
There are an awful lot of refugee organisations, certainly in the Northwest and Manchester area. I know there are, and to contact one of them, you know, also to support your organisation too, Jesuit Refugee Service. There are other things like in Manchester, for instance, Freedom from Torture have got an office there, haven't they? And for those interested in community sponsorship, very strong, there are very strong groups in Manchester and Salford, and Caritas Salford itself, I know, does an awful lot of work. They've got special workers there that are helping groups to form and to welcome people. And I advise them to get in touch with Caritas Salford too. Yeah, Caritas Salford are very active on community sponsorship and also have a number of different projects. Actually, it's a really, really good idea. So we're just coming towards the end. I know it's a little bit tight. It feels as if we could continue this discussion for a long period of time, but I promised to give the floor to Austen just to sum up and give a kind of last reflection, really, based on what's come up and how it relates to the themes that Pope Francis has picked up. So if I can just hand over to Austen.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you all very much indeed for giving time to this book and this discussion. I've been very moved by it and edified by it, and thank Dr. Barry and Rabbi Rich and Bishop Paul and you all and Alam for her testimony and Jackie for her story. I think you've made us all feel a little bit more hopeful tonight, which I guess is something that will make Francis very happy. I said earlier that he summarizes the way our societies are called to respond to the challenge, because it is a challenge of migration and refugees, and it is welcome, protect, promote and integrate. Now, there are so many examples of the ways we can do this, and he talks about, simplifying the granting of visas, adopting programs of community sponsorship as we've been hearing about tonight. He talks about opening humanitarian corridors for the most vulnerable refugees, and this is a scheme which has been used a lot in the EU, which avoids people having to fall into the hands of people traffickers. In other words, to create safe passages for people. But then all the ways in which we exercise that welcome and that integration when people are with us, and Jackie and Alam have illustrated that beautifully, providing suitable, dignified housing, access to basic services, helping people learn to navigate the new culture that they're in, helping them to put down roots, because with rights come roots, with roots come rights, rights and roots are linked to each other. The Pope also says in Fratelli Tutti, for those who are not recent arrivals, it's important to apply the concept of citizenship. People don't become citizens just by walking into a country, but by putting down roots, by forming part of society. We earn the right and indeed the duty to be citizens. Citizenship is based on equality of rights and duties under which all enjoy justice. So the challenge of our time is how we can express the need for fraternity in concrete, material, legal ways, like housing, like citizenship. And above all, to develop the awareness, as we've been saying in this call, that as the crisis has so powerfully, painfully illustrated, we're all in this together. We are one world, whether we like it or not. What happens in other countries deeply affects us. The war in Syria is also our war. And if we can accept that, and we can use our genius, our organizing ability, our political power, our economic means to deal with these challenges, to face them together, then they can be overcome. And this is not about, it's not a transactional thing. Of course, migrants, refugees, I'm delighted that people like Akhalam are in my country, because I know that my country is going to be better for her being present. But this isn't just a transactional relationship. It's about gratuitousness. It's about things that are just good in themselves. And it is that gratuitous acceptance that people are gifts, that we are gifts to each other. That's what, it's not just about having scientists and inventors and capitalists, people with money. It's also accepting people as they are, as human beings, will make us all richer. So just to end, and again, to thank you all and Neil and Michele for organizing this. To end just with a few words from the book, it's right there in the epilogue. The Pope says, look, he talks about leaving the labyrinth of our own introspection, the labyrinth of our own ideology. He says, let yourself be pulled along, shaken up and challenged. And he says, maybe it'll be something you've read in these pages, some story that's touched your heart. And maybe some of us tonight have been touched by what we've heard. It may be a group of people you've heard about on the news, or something that you know about that's in your own neighborhood. You've just heard about people, a family, or a group of people in your neighborhood, somebody whose stories have moved you. And maybe there's something that is calling to you. And he says it might be a local elderly people's home, it might be an ecological regeneration project, or as he says, it might be a refugee hospitality center, the kind of center that JRS does so beautifully, or it may be people closer to home who need you. If you feel that, stop. Stop. He says, pray. If you're a Christian, read the gospel. If you're not, pray in your own way, or just create a space inside you to listen. Open yourself. Take the first step. Dare to transcend. Dare to dream. And he says, then act, call up, go, offer your service. Say you don't have a clue what they do, but maybe you can help. Say you'd like to be part of a different world, and you thought that this might be a good place to start. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Austen. And I would say my own experience of running a refugee organisation is that we often think that we're there to help, but actually we come away learning more and gaining more in ways that we could never have imagined and never ever have imagined. And actually that to be invited to welcome a refugee is a great invitation and a great gift that you have no idea where it might take you. That's all from me. I hand over to Michele to finish. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to all our panelists, and thank you to everybody for being with us.
So thank you so much, Sarah. Thanks everybody who has attended today's event. We are really enlightened. Thank you, Austen, on all the panelists. Thank you, Aham, for that wonderful story. And Jackie, as always, the story of the bus. I love that story. So we are really grateful for you having taken time with us. Get involved with, do sponsorship. It's an exciting stuff to do. And if you already are keen to do it, here is here's an address to get in touch, and really get in touch with. Do click on the link you can see, or get in touch with inquiries@reset.org.uk to get more info, because doing community sponsorship is actually something exciting, as you heard from those who have done it. Danny, Jackie, it's something interesting, and we really want to see you doing it. By the end of the day, it's all about building a country that's welcoming, a country that's welcoming. Just to remind that I am a former refugee myself, and I've been welcomed into this country, and I'm really proud of the welcome I've had, and I really want to see that thing happen. That's what we want to do at UK Welcomes Refugees: promote welcome, build a country that's more welcoming, build a country that's more inclusive, where we thrive together. We believe we can thrive together. So without further ado, I say thank you so much. Have a good evening.